On today's Locked On Jayhawks, we recap a long weekend that was over the Thanksgiving break. Kansas falls to Kansas State in football. We'll do a little recap of basketball, more of that on tomorrow's show after the Texas Southern game tonight. Mostly KUK State recap after the Jayhawks fall short in the Sunflower Showdown.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us, subscribe to us, ask any questions on YouTube, or hit me up at D Johnson Radio. You can also hear me on Rock Chalk Sports Talk Monday through Friday from 3 to 6 on at KLWN in Lawrence. And on today's edition of the show, we'll do a little basketball recap, more of that on tomorrow's show, but mostly going to be focused on the Kansas State football game. The Jayhawks fall to Kansas State in this one and fall to 6-6 on the season. They finished the year 6-6, 3-6 in Big 12 play. Let's start with this. Big picture, season's over for the regular season. Obviously, bowl game ahead. If you would have said before the year Kansas was going to go 6-6, win 3 Big 12 games, that they weren't going to be blown in the Sunflower Showdown, which they weren't, you would have obviously taken that. You would have jumped at that opportunity, and now Kansas is going to a bowl game. Now they get extra practices moving forward for some of their young players or current players to get healthier, get better, get more improved, get more reps. And I think this is going to be super beneficial for this team. It's less about the result of the bowl game and more about the opportunity to do that. But now that you have kind of skidded toward the end of this season, the bowl game would be even more important for you to win. So you finish with a winning record and feel like you win out with a nice stamp to the season. But that's neither here nor there. Kansas falls to Kansas State to close out the season. And it was a game that Kansas just made too many mistakes. You lose 47-27. And, you know, I guess on a positive note, you seem to close the gap like we've seen a lot of these matchups in recent history outside of really the 2018 one where you randomly almost won. Be really favored by Kansas State and winning these games by 30, 40 points. Even last year, it was 35-10 in Lawrence, and that game didn't really even feel as close as that. It just felt like Kansas State got up big and then kind of sat on the lead from there. This was closing the gap. Even though the score, finishes 20 points, the game is kind of a weird, dichotomy, because the game felt closer than 20 points, but also Kansas could never really get it closer than like a 2-score game when it was, it was 30-21 and they just couldn't really get over that hump. So maybe it was never really like a close game, but it wasn't ever like a blowout or that Kansas was down 2 scores with the football before they punted away with 8 minutes or something in the game. So like you were in the game, you made it entertaining for the majority of it. So you've closed the gap a bit there. When you look at the line of scrimmage, there wasn't like a huge difference between either team on the line of scrimmage. Certainly there were certain cases where K-State won, certain cases where Kansas won. And that's exciting. You just made too many mistakes, which we've had this discussion before this season. And I don't really know where to go with this, that this Kansas team, like you think back to the Texas Tech game, you think about to like the first half of the Baylor game, you think about just lining up and defensive issues or certain mistakes you made against Oklahoma. There have been a lot of self-inflicted mistakes on Kansas, whether it's been penalties, whether it's been, and this was the big one in this game, the special teams. The special teams was the big equalizer in this game. Kansas is now ranked 128th of, I think, 131 teams on ESPN's SP Plus in special teams grade. And that comes after they actually rated pretty well early in the season. They have just kind of tanked there, and they tanked in that game. You have the muff punt in the early going. You have the kick return. I mean, so many different things went wrong for you on special teams, and that's something, along with the mistakes, that like when you think of teams that maybe don't have as much talent as other, like the Oklahomas or the Texas, like something that Kansas State historically has done well over the past, 3 decades is they've been really fundamentally sound. They don't hurt themselves. They don't turn the ball over. They don't have penalties. And they're really good on special teams. And they definitely don't make special teams mistakes. Kansas, weirdly enough, was able to get to a bowl game this year in 6-6, despite the fact that they've made a lot of those mistakes. Now, when they started 5-0 on the season, they weren't making a lot of those mistakes and weren't having special teams issues. So I think that does show you that yeah, for this team to be good, they need to do those things. But if you would have told me that Kansas was going to be 6-6 at the end of this season, and we'd be looking back at a couple games, including the final one against Kansas State, saying that, yeah, they had all these special teams gaffes and just too many penalties or key turnover or whatever it is here or there that they made, you wouldn't have thought that that was going to be the recipe for this team to get a lot better. They've just gotten a lot better in a lot of different ways, whether it was the scheming up or some of the great skill talent or the great play of Jalon Daniels, or maybe just some key turnovers forced or some key talent that you brought in on defense with like Lonnie Phelps and Craig Young. Like, yeah, like I said, in the first 5 games when you were 5-0, you weren't making those mistakes and you did those things well, but that kind of faded for you over the back half of the season, and nothing was more evident than that game. If you don't make some of those self-inflicted mistakes, it's probably a 1-score game, and who knows what happens at that point in time. Like, maybe Kansas, you can convince yourself that they could find a way to win in Manhattan. I know certainly a lot of people viewed it from the standpoint of, well, next year it's in Lawrence, and maybe if you don't make as many mistakes, and maybe if you have a better team, and maybe if they have a worse team, right? Like NUDK, Uzoma, and Deuce Vaughn could be gone. I don't know. Then maybe next year is the year that you strike in the Sunflower Showdown. So this year felt like kind of the step forward to getting closer there. But again, just too many mistakes. And it's weird because I do view this as being a very good coaching staff, right? I mean, in what they have done to turn around this program for Kansas can't be spoken more kindly enough. But that's what's weird about making all these mistakes, because you correlate those things with being a good coach or a well-coached football team, right? So I'm not like, I just don't know what to do with that, I guess is my point. I'm not like pointing blame or sticking the finger to say, oh, you did this or you did that. Like, it confuses my mind, because we think about this team as being such a well-coached football team. And we talk about Lance Leipold as being this great coach, and he is, and being this Big 12 Coach of the Year candidate, National Coach of the Year candidate, and all those things are true. But why is this happening? Because those are things that usually the good coaching shores up and fixes. Like, are the KU players just not listening to the message? Are there certain holes? Or is it just because you brought in a bunch of transfers and, it takes time to establish that culture and identity of not making mistakes? And so you have a lot of transfers who are more short fixes, and you're doing so many different things schematically, offensively and defensively, that stuff won't be out of their game till year 3 or year 4. And maybe we jumped the gun there, but they did some other things to make up for it this year to get to the 6 wins. I don't know what the answer is there, but that was kind of disappointing that was the case. It was certainly a frustrating game from that standpoint, because it felt like you just kind of gave them the game. But overall, probably about the best we've seen Kansas play against Kansas State, at least since 2018. And certainly made you feel, I don't know, different kinds of ways that, again, Kansas is as good as a lot of these other Big 12 teams. You lost, feel like you could have been more, but hey, it's the end of November. Everybody's caring about football. Like, that's certainly a positive. And I guess, yeah, if you're just reflecting on the season, fun ride overall. You go 6-6. The fact that everyone was engaged this late into the year, even with basketball going on, like, huge step up. And obviously excited to keep talking about this team now that they're going to be in a bowl game, which we'll wait and see what that is. Who knows it? At the latest, we would know by this Sunday. At the earliest, maybe a report will leak out that Kansas has accepted a bowl bid, like Brett McMurphy or Pete Thamel or someone will have kind of something that comes out there. Okay, we're going to get to our GOATs of the week. For this one, actually a good amount of good GOATs this week, even though Kansas lost by 20, but certainly some bad ones that we'll have to get to as well. But first, this episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by Upside. Inflation has us all thinking about different ways to cut back, whether it's driving less, dining out less, buying less from the grocery store, maybe spending a little bit less on Christmas gifts, just finding ways to shave back money. That's why I started using Upside. Upside is an incredible app for anyone who buys gas, groceries, or dines out, which, come on, you're doing one of the three at least, probably two of the three, maybe even all three. With Upside, I don't have to cut back because I get cash back on every purchase. You're talking about, going to the gas station and just being able to quickly pull up the app, a couple taps, and you're good to go. You're getting money back on that. And that's extra money that I can use for, tickets to go see a Chiefs game on Sunday, or taking my wife out to dinner, or buying an even nicer Christmas present for my parents or wife or whoever it is at this time of year. To get started, download the free Upside app, use my promo code LOCKED, get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase, $10 or more, claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside, check in at the business, pay as usual with credit or debit card and get paid. In comparison to credit card rewards or loyalty programs, you can earn 3 times more cash back with every purchase with Upside. Upside users are earning more than $1 million per week. It's probably why they have a 4.8 star rating on the App Store. Download the free Upside app. Use promo code LOCKED to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase, $10 or more. $5 cash back on your first purchase, $10 or more using promo code LOCKED. This episode of Locked On Jayhawks is also brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's super easy to scroll through on the app. Everybody has it on your phone. You can easily be scrolling through and see what other people are up to that you know work-wise. And then boom, all of a sudden I see someone's hiring. I can quickly tap on it, quickly send my resume that's already stored on LinkedIn. It's super easy to go through, which makes it even better for your business because more people are going to see it, more people are going to react to it. Just add the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to hire. You want to finish the year strong, whether it's holiday sales, whether it's feeling good heading into 2023, just like Kansas football is going to be looking to finish the year strong with a big bowl win. LinkedIn Jobs is rated the #1 by small businesses in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. On to GOATs of the week. First up, we got Jared Casey. Jared Casey had 4 catches for 23 yards for Kansas in the loss to Kansas State. Not numbers that jump off the page. He nearly had that insane touchdown grab as well, which I don't know if you saw the post game or the celebration. It ended up being a drop, but he did one of these. You know, you can't see this if you're not watching on YouTube, but kind of the like, it smells here or something. I don't know what that was about, but I thought it was very funny. Nonetheless, it's not like the 4 catches for 23 yards is not like a huge number, but some of the catches he made were huge. Like there was that, I think it was a 3rd down or maybe it was a 4th down even, where it's kind of a high pass over the middle. It's raining, the ball's wet, slippery, and he kind of has to like one hand tip it, juggle, catch to himself while he's taking a hit and hold on. Like some of the catches he makes, he just has such good hands, and he almost came up with that touchdown, which would have even added to it more. But again, he just is such a good blocker as well. He had a 74 pass blocking grade on Pro Football Focus, one of the higher numbers for KU. He keeps some big blocks in the run as normal. Like you see some of the Devin Neal stretch plays to the outside where he's making cuts, and it's Jared Casey kind of sealing the edge on the outside. Shout out Scott Chasen, former friend of the show, now the Kansas City Star, who we were texting about this. And, you know, you can make the argument that Jared Casey is KU's best player. Now, if you're going most important, most valuable, like you always go with the quarterback. The quarterback impacts so much. Or maybe you even go with Lonnie Phelps because he's rushing the opposing quarterback. And it's on a Kansas defense that without Lonnie Phelps, like they already struggle enough. Now imagine without Lonnie Phelps, that gets really problematic. So he's not the most valuable on the team. Plus KU has other good tight ends like Mason Fairchild. But if you're just going by what Scott Chasen told me, he said, if you're going by like Madden rating, like what is this guy rated in Madden? He might be the highest because he'd have a good run blocking grade. He'd have a good pass blocking grade. He'd have maybe the best hands on the team. Like he just does everything for this team. He is awesome. So Jared Casey deserves good GOAT of the week status. Lonnie Phelps, mentioned him just a moment ago, how good he's been this season. He finally had another sack. He's had a couple weeks where he hasn't had any sacks, but he's gotten QB hurries, QB pressures. He's gotten close to it. Got up to his 7th sack of the season, which I think puts him back past Kyron Johnson. That was certainly an off-season talk of, can he do as much production as Kyron Johnson last year? Well, he just got past him with that last sack. He was KU's highest graded defender on Pro Football Focus, 84 grade. He graded out as a 91 as a pass rusher. He had the strip sack, which unfortunately the KU offense couldn't capitalize on. And I will say this, like, honestly, Lonnie Phelps could have done a lot more. There were a lot of times where he broke through or kind of beat up the pass protection of Kansas State, but Will Howard did a really good job of kind of maneuvering the pocket or rolling to the left side or stepping up, whatever it was. Otherwise, Lonnie Phelps might have had 2 or 3 sacks in that game, or if Will Howard would have had to hold on to it, if there would have been maybe better coverage for another half second on a couple other plays, he might have even had another game-wrecking play. He was really good. Jalon Daniels, I thought about not putting on either list, but I leaned toward putting him on good goat. So I'll just put him up here. 20 of 32, 168 yards. Again, not numbers that jump off the page, under 6 yards per attempt, which isn't great, but it's also in the rain. The ball was slippery. He had a pretty good running day, 8 carries for 51 yards and a touchdown. And that's mainly the biggest reason why he was able to scramble around, keep plays alive, even when guys weren't open, dealing with the weather and the inclement conditions. You're facing a good Kansas State pass rush, so being able to maneuver the pocket and keep plays alive were certainly good for you. And gave guys chances, I think is the best way of putting it. And the fact that he was able to run at all was really good sign. I don't know if you go back to the Texas game and say that was just, them shaking off the rust, or if they purposely didn't do any of the option stuff to save it for K-State, or if it was his first game back for health and they just couldn't do it, but it worked out that they wanted to, or they got down so early so they didn't want to show it on film. I don't know what the case was, but nonetheless, Jalon showed it a bit in this past game. He even had the one play where everybody's freaking out. Oh, is he injured? I think it was just the wind got knocked out of him. So that was a good thing that he was able to take some hits and still stay in there and deal with some of the option stuff. So not his best performance, but he looked a lot more like the original Jalon Daniels we were used to. The ball was coming out normal, and that was even in the rain. Like, you felt like you still had some zip on the throws. You felt like you could see the lofted deep balls. You could see him running the football well. That looked like the normal Jalon, which is really exciting for what he's going to look like now with a couple of weeks off to get even healthier and to get the rust shaken off even more before the bowl game. I expect a big game from Jalon in the bowl game. Good goat for Craig Young. He led Kansas with 8 tackles. He also had a sack. He had another pass deflection and another quarterback hurry. He was KU's second greatest or highest graded Pro Football Focus defender with an 80 grade. He was really good at tackling in the open field. He continues to be one of the, because KU's defense has really struggled, especially over the back half here, but there still are bright spots. Like Lonnie Phelps is a bright spot. Craig Young is a bright spot. And I am really excited to see what Craig Young, assuming he does come back next year, is going to provide for this team defensively, because he was already really good this year. I think he could be a star next year and be an all Big 12 type of player. Devin Neal, good goat of the week. The stats, again, kind of like Jared Casey, don't blow you away. 16 carries, 59 yards. That's less than 4 yards a carry. He also had 2 catches, but for 10 yards, it's 5 yards a catch. Like, those numbers aren't crazy. He did have 2 touchdowns, though, which touchdowns important, right? That's putting the points on the board. But he had some big gains, and it seemed like he really found a lot of hidden yards, breaking a lot of tackles, making runs that could be 2 yards into 3 or 4, making stretch plays that could be 5 or 6 yards into 8 or 9 or 10-yard runs. I thought he did a really good job with that. And that one catch I really want to highlight. He had 2 catches. The one that he had on the third down near the red zone, or maybe it's in the red zone, and he catches it. Jalon's under pressure. He catches it. There's a guy right next to him, and he has to kind of like, it's a high catch. He has to go up to make the grab. And while he's making the grab, has to kind of avoid that first tackle, then has another guy tackling him from the side, but still is able to kind of lean forward and just barely get that first down on like a 3rd and 5. That was a stupendous play for him that only ends up as like a 5 or 6 yard catch, but it was a really important play that kept the drive alive that ended up being a touchdown. So finding a lot of hidden yards for Devin Neal. I thought he was really good in the game, even if the numbers weren't one of his more astounding games. Dominic Pooney, good go to the week. He was highest graded pass blocker on the team for KU, graded out as an 84. That's an awesome number. He was actually the only Jayhawk who was above a 70 on both pass blocking and run blocking grade. So he did a little bit of everything. I think he's going to be all Big 12 something, whether it's second team, honorable mention, first team. In my opinion, he should be at least second team. He's been fantastic this year. That's going to be a big loss for Kansas headed into the offseason, but he's been so good. And the story of him coming over from D2 ball, like, hasn't missed a beat at all coming over. Okay, into the bad goats of the week. OJ Burrows. I'm part of the OJ Burrows, hype fan club. And I should mention this if we're going to put him on here, because it was a bad game for him. OJ Burrows had a great season. As a sophomore, true sophomore, he's taken such big steps from last year, has been a willing open field tackler, has been one of KU's best players in coverage at that back end. He's a ball hawk on that side. We haven't really seen that translate over just yet from what he did at his high school days, but that'll be coming, I'm sure, by the time he is an upperclassman. He's been really good this year, but that was a tough game for him. Probably his worst game of the season. Had a great open field tackle to start, and then it all went downhill. He drops the punt on special teams. He was KU's lowest graded Pro Football Focus defender at a 41, lowest graded KU player in coverage at a 39.9. He missed a tackle on 4 tries. He was targeted 4 times in coverage. He gave up 3 catches for 58 yards and 2 touchdowns. So not ideal game from OJ Burrows, but I expect him to bounce back because I do think he is a good player. Special teams as a whole, that's kind of the carryover from OJ Burrows. Like, that was part of it. But special teams as a whole, absolute disaster for Kansas. That's what made the game a 20-point game when it probably could have been a single-digit game, or at least a 2-score game, or maybe even a game that Kansas could have won, right? If they don't have all the special teams disasters. Absolute mess. And the fact that Kansas doesn't have a special teams coordinator made it get even more heat over the course of that game. And because they've struggled in that regard a lot lately. OJ Burrow's muff punt, you let the next punt roll because you were worried about muffing the punt. That hit at like the 20, it rolled all the way inside I think your 5. I think it was out at like the 4-yard line instead of just fair catching it and picking up 16 extra yards of field position. You had the kick return where you bring it back only to the 9 when you should have just fair caught it or whatever and just taken the ball out with better field position. And you get the block in the back, so you're at the 4, and that leads to a safety. So there's 9 points right away. Reese Vernon can't punt it very far, which that's just kind of unfortunate. Give up a long kick return to Malik Knowles toward the end of the game. K-State always shows the good value of a good special teams. You have, as a program over the last decade, shown the value of a bad special teams in a negative way, and that unfortunately reared its head against Kansas State. So hopefully that's something that can get fixed for Kansas, and maybe adding more depth over the course of this next offseason, as they already did last year, and making it even better this year will add to that. And then the last bad goat, Rich Miller. He's put up big tackle numbers this year, but last few games has missed a lot of tackles. I don't know if he's dealing with an injury or fatigue over the course of the season, but certainly at the beginning of the season, Rich Miller looked very good for this defense, but that has kind of faded a little bit here. He missed 3 tackles in the game, which was 1/3 of his tries as a tackler. He was targeted twice in coverage as well. He gave up 2 completions for 104 yards. One of those I think was credited against him was that little screen pass on the 3rd and long with Deuce Vaughn, which, by the way, that would be a bad goat. Kansas on 3rd and longs. They got better as the game went on, but that continues to be a problem. They can't get off the field on like 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10. I don't know if that's a coaching thing. I don't know if that's a personnel thing with the secondary, not having enough depth, not having enough pass rush or what, but that was certainly a problem. That was the biggest one of them all, that you could have had them punting at their own end with a raining day. And overall, KU linebackers continue to struggle. It's not quite the worst Power 5 unit of any linebacker core like it probably was last year, but it's certainly the worst in the Big 12. Tywone Berryhill missed 2 tackles. He graded out of 57. Rich Miller graded out of 48. Lorenzo McCaskill graded out of 59. Craig Young has been great, but I almost more classify him as a safety. Eric Gilliard graded out pretty well in the game. He was a 71. Didn't miss any tackles, but he only played 14 snaps. So it's like limited playing time. So that's certainly been an issue for Kansas, and one that I'm sure they'll continue to address in the transfer portal this next offseason and hope for another year of improvement, because Tywone Berryhill and Rich Miller have gotten better this year. You hope they can get even better next year, especially with both of them kind of fading toward the end of the season here. All right, we're going to get to a quick recap on the basketball court in just a second here. But first, this episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by Nissan. And this week's thrilling moment in college football is brought to you by Nissan. The thrilling designs behind the new lineup from Nissan are intended to empower drivers and vehicles as capable as the driver themselves. When I think of the unbelievable abilities on the field for this week's thrilling moment, I guess I would go with that Jared Casey tough catch, either that or the Lonnie Phelps strip sack. That was a big one. It was 30-21. K-State was maybe going in to maybe get a field goal or a touchdown toward the end of half and extend the lead and get some momentum, but makes the big strip sack around the edge. He was dominant all game long, and that gave Kansas offense a chance. If they would have been able to go down and even get a field goal before halftime and then get the ball in a 1-score game and then double dip and score again, who knows what happens in that game, but they didn't take advantage of either opportunity, but that was certainly fun. Now, obviously, this is for college football. If I could do a basketball one, I'd like to mention Bobby Pettiford's stick-back layup. Just able to maneuver your body like that and get that ball in. Fantastic stuff from Bobby. That was his only points of the game. And boy, was it 2 big ones against Wisconsin in the Thursday game. This segment has been inspired by the thrilling new designs featured across Nissan's new lineup of vehicles. Pursue what thrills you in the all-new Frontier, Armada, or Pathfinder today. Available now at nissanusa.com. Finishing things up here with a recap of the basketball team. They go 2-1 in the battle for Atlantis. They're playing Texas Southern tonight at 7:00. And for that one, Texas Southern, not too hot. It should be kind of an easy win for Kansas. Early line, they're favored by 24. You just hope that maybe they can start to find inroads at the center position and with the bench, and you see less of a clunky offense in that game. But as far as what we saw in the battle for Atlantis, the offense was very clunky. You shot like right around or under 40% in all of your 3 games. You certainly were missing that interior presence, scoring inside, having a center who could have their back to the basket. The last game, you saw what happens when Jalen Wilson isn't playing like the National Player of the Year candidate. I mean, 3 of 15, the Kansas offense as a whole struggled. So there's certainly some takeaways and some questions you have. But also, big picture, Kansas lost to Dayton last season at this point in time. Tennessee's really good. Did you know Tennessee is ranked 3rd on KenPom right now? They blew out Gonzaga in an exhibition. That didn't even count to their KenPom rating. Otherwise, they might be like number 2 or number 1. So it wasn't ideal. KU offense struggled all week outside of really Jalon in games 1 and game 2 and Grady Dick in the first half of game 1 and a few moments maybe from like Kevin McCullough or DeJuan Harris. You still can't figure out anything at center. You still are getting blasted on the boards. But big picture, I think they're in a fine spot. They're 6-1. I believe Bill Self is going to get a young team playing better by the time we get to February, but that probably means you're going to have more hurdles and more bumps along the way, whether it's this week against Seton Hall or next week against Missouri or the week after against Indiana. There are going to be some possible stumbling blocks or early in conference play for you. But overall, you're 6-1 with a loss to a really good team in which you didn't play well and shots weren't falling and shots were falling for them. And you have some things you need to figure out and that are definitely worries and continue to stack up. And I'm not going to say it's all sunshine and rainbows and we completely excuse everything, but big picture, I think they're going to be fine. And this is everything we expected in the preseason. In the preseason, we said young team, they could have some lumps in the early going and then they might figure it out by February. Well, we're seeing that right now, but they're still 6-1. They have a big win over Duke. Wisconsin and NC State could be NCAA tournament teams. Big picture, they're going to be fine, but you definitely want to see the progression arrow starting to point up some point soon, especially when you're playing a team like Texas Southern tonight, who gives you an opportunity for some of the young bigs who are inexperienced and young players to maybe start to get their rhythm and mojo going. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Jayhawks. Coming up on tomorrow's show, we're going to do a full basketball recap of the battle for Atlantis, more in-depth stuff, and also a recap of the Texas Southern game from tonight. If you have anything you'd like for the show to talk about or want to follow along on the action, you can reach out at D Johnson Radio, or you can hit us up in the comment section on YouTube. And don't forget that you can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube, so you're getting all the latest with Locked On Jayhawks. That'll do it for today's episode. Have a good rest of your day. Talk to you tomorrow on another edition, or you can hear me on Rock Chalk Sports Talk later today. Adios.